Live, Adam, I believe. Is that correct?
We are live, yes.
Excellent. So thanks everyone for coming along to our webinar this morning, and it's really great to have you on board. Um, I would love to introduce you to Adam Gordon, and just to give you a little bit of background about Adam, for the last 27 years, Adam has run a business consultancy practice, and he's been assisting small businesses put more cash in their bank by improving their profitability, giving them control of their business, and bringing some balance into their life. And, you know, we all really want that, don't we? Adam assists SMEs who are struggling with cash flow, with profitability, and with available management time. You know, as a small business owner, you know, you work hard, you're a good operator, and you have fantastic areas of expertise. But 9 times out of 10, you're short of cash and you don't have the time to enjoy what you do. So because you're always busy, you lack the time to identify the key constraints that are on you and also on your business. The businesses that Adam's worked with range from engineering, manufacturing, transport, tourism, IT, power generation, ship repair, construction, repair and maintenance, to catering and conference and event management, and the list goes on and on and on. The common theme is that they are largely established by people with good technical expertise and skills, but who find themselves struggling with cash flow, with profitability and time, and in areas in which they haven't had the opportunity or the time to develop their own expertise. The techniques and skills Adam brings to bear are built on all those years of identifying issues that are draining cash from small businesses, and for him, finding the solutions, plugging the profit leaks. So Adam, welcome. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to you right now.
Thanks, Kerry. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. So I've worked with this name that somebody popped on me many years ago, the Profits Leak Detective. He said, "Oh, that's what you do. You're a Profit Leak Detective." And I'll actually show you the graph that generated that in a little while. But first, before we go, let me just look at how we're going to interact today. Yeah, that'll come back. You'll see on the right-hand side a message box. You put your messages in down the bottom here, pop them in, and they'll appear in the chat box. And we'll use that for if you've got any questions at any time or anything like that, drop them in the chat box. I'll try and look at those as we go. I'll stop for questions at the end of each section, and obviously at the end of the session, we'll have a full Q&A. But feel free to pop questions up or comments at any time, and I'll certainly be asking you for comments as we go. And just to let us know who's there, would you like to pop your name into the chat box via that question link in the message box and tell us where you're coming from? If you'd like to put your name there.
Well, for all those folks who don't know, I'm in Melbourne, and it's very warm this morning for good old Melbourne. Humid and 26 degrees at 10:15 in the morning, and we're heading for 33. So a few thunderstorms coming our way as well.
And I'm on the north coast of New South Wales at a lovely place called Yamba, which is one of those interesting places. I see we've got Lynette from Toowoomba and Peter from Perth. Good morning, Julie. Good morning to you. Phil's in Brisbane. I was up in Brisbane at the weekend to see Hugh Jackman. Fantastic performance. Another Julie in Sydney. Okay, that's great. Great to see you. So let's move along. So who's this presentation for? It's for you if your business is winning sales but lacks cash and profitability. If you find you're spending too much time at work and you're really seriously committed to getting more cash into your bank account, the problems, as Kerry mentioned in her introduction, is that so many small businesses lack cash and lack profitability. They can get the sales they need, but not necessarily the right sales, and they do not make enough money from them. what I try and do is help people identify the right things and find those leaks, and then how we might plug them so that you're making real money and you're getting money back in your cash account. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. Kerry touched on it in that intro, but a little bit about myself. I've had many years senior managed experience, mostly in the private sector, a bit in government. I got to say I'm certainly a private sector person. My industrial experience was largely in manufacturing, the aerospace industry. That was a great, fascinating time in my life. Aluminium boat manufacture, farm machinery industry, and I have had a couple of years in retail, but it was mainly manufacturing before I went into my own consulting business. I've bid and successfully negotiated profitable contracts with US and British aerospace companies, people like Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, if you're interested in aircraft at all. A fascinating time of life. I've marketed marine equipment in Malaysia, Singapore and Burma, or Myanmar as it's known these days. And I've even marketed farm machinery in the Middle East in certainly more peaceful times, and I don't think I'd like to be going there today. I've run, as Kerry mentioned, my own business consultancy practice for the last 27 years, assisting small businesses become more profitable and improve cash flow. And the last point is something I've always enjoyed for quite a few years now. I've been a Business Excellence Award judge. And when you judge in Business Excellence Awards, you find many excellent and interesting businesses. Okay, so who do I work with? Well, I don't usually work with startups. I usually work with people who've been in business for at least 5 years. 5 years is, and you've probably heard the term, 2/3 of businesses will fail within the first 3 years and 3/4 within the first 5 years, whatever. So I work with businesses who have got through that hump but are still usually struggling a bit. They're usually turning over at least 650,000, but yeah, marginally profitable best and short of cash. And what always seems to go with that is that they're people who want to overcome the problem of working those sort of long hours, 6 or 7 days a week. And it's hard. It's a struggle. But I also like working with people who are action oriented, who are actually willing to make some changes to get where they want to go, and that's important. Okay, let's give you an overview of the topics I'm going to cover today. I'm going to talk about, firstly, obviously, what's a profit leak. I'm going to look at the number one problem that prevents you generating the cash you deserve. Three keys to boost the cash in your bank account without having to work harder or longer. And finally, 3 common but cash leaking mistakes to avoid. Okay, so let's start with what's a profit leak and why it should matter to you. After all, there's not much point in working hard to generate extra sales if you have a profit leak. The example I'm going to give you is actually not a business one, but it was certainly a costly one for me. And I call it my water bill problem. I lived in Darwin for many years. Darwin, as most of you would know, obviously it's at the top of Australia. It's in the tropics, and being in the tropics, we have 2 seasons: a wet and a dry. During the dry, you can go 5-6 months without a skerrick of rain, and it more than makes up for it during the wet. Now, if you live up there, you've got a garden. During the dry, you want your garden to show. You reticulate. To use automatic reticulation to water the garden, and during the wet, obviously, you turn it off. Now up there, you get a bill. You get your water on a quarterly bill. I guess most places do that. And if we were billed monthly, I would have picked this problem up earlier, but billed quarterly. And just as a side hint, it's one of the reasons I'm so keen on businesses reporting at least monthly, not just their financials, but also their key lead and lag KPIs. Because there is a problem, you want to pick it up early. Anyway, my problem was I got a bill. It was a wet season bill, and it was double what it should be. Why was it so? Well, couldn't find it. There were no taps leaking in the house. There were no running loos and all those usual problems. And in the garden, if there was, it was a wet season. How do you find a leak when everything's green? Where was the problem? There were no taps I could find leaking, all the usual things you'd look for. So how did I find it? I found it by accident in the end. I trod in this very, very mushy bit of garden, and underneath that was a split pipe, and that's where all the water was coming, and but it was pure luck. I just trod on the spot. I suppose I would have found it eventually if I'd done a very meticulous check around, or if I'd waited for the dry season and found a very green patch and the rest being brown. But finding leaks by accident really, really isn't good enough, is it? And that's the problem for businesses. If you don't know the profits are leaking, how do you plug the leak? Sometimes, there's an obvious problem. Anyone in business, if there's a problem, an obvious problem, you go and fix it. If you can see it, you can do something about it. But what about the times when you don't know profits are leaking? If you don't know because you're only getting quarterly figures or half yearly, or even worse, I've even seen people try and operate on annual figures, because by then it's too late. The money's gone. Sure, you might plug the leak, but what's gone is gone. And look, in the 27 years that Kerry referred to, I found most businesses do have profit leaks draining cash, which could be theirs. They just don't know they're there. And if they did, obviously they would have plugged them by now. So, yeah. If you could cut a profit leak, increase the cash by, say, $10,000 in your bank account, it's simple, really. Find the leak and plug it. And because everybody's got them, there's always a chance of increasing the cash and profitability. You just need to find and plug the leaks. After all, when it comes to business, cash is king. That's what I think is so important. So my question, is this you? If your business has profit leaks, you're probably experiencing a bank account that's short of cash. You've got irate creditors pressing you. You're probably spending long hours at work, and there's no free time for the family or for a hobby like fishing, say, very popular where I am up here at Yamba. And there's always stress. There's always stress. So, can I ask, are any of you feeling any of those symptoms? Again, if we could just have a quick yes, no in the chat box. You needn't tell me which one it is, but do you have some of those? And let's have a look. Oh. Anyone feeling any of those symptoms at all? I guess if the fact that you're here means there is a chance that you're doing that. Any comments? Yeah, couple of yeses popping in. As I say, I guess the fact that you're here means there's a fair chance that something like that's occurring. So picture this then. Kerry, I might just get you to mute your mic if you could.
Oh, sorry, Adam.
Yeah, that's all right. You see the little mute thing on the top of your screen there?
Absolutely.
There we go. Thank you. So picture this. When you've plugged the leak and you get all that extra cash, you'll have money in the bank you can use, willing and friendly suppliers, a lifestyle. You'll get to do the fishing or the golf or whatever it is that you enjoy, and most importantly, you've freed yourself from the stress burden. So, yeah, pretty important. I won't ask the question, but if you could get that extra $10,000 a month every month, would it make a difference to you? How would you use it? Just like you to think about that. Won't ask for an answer at this stage as I've got on the screen, because I'd like to keep moving. But yeah, it would make a difference, wouldn't it? If you could just, without having to make any big extra effort, get that extra cash regularly into your account. Excuse me. So what I want to move on to now, having established a profit leak, is something that's occurring that you don't know is occurring. You know you've got a problem, but you don't know what it is and where it is. What's the number one problem that prevents you generating the cash that you deserve. As I say, there's not much point in working hard to generate extra sales if you've got a profit leak. And the number one reason why you're probably suffering is that you don't know what to look for, where to look, or perhaps even when to look. And that seems to be a recurring theme I've had with the clients I've worked over the years. It's a lack of information that tells them what's going on. And I'll give you, I'll run you through an example. I've got other examples through this presentation. This bloke's called Andrew. It's a real story. Andrew's a Boilermaker, and he's a pretty good one. And he did what people who are, often do when they're good at something. He's gone into business by himself and initially did very well. Excuse me while I just take a sip. Get rid of that tickle in my throat. He and his wife worked hard. She ran the office, he ran the shop floor. The problem they had is that they weren't making any money. Things were getting tough and getting tense. And this was the situation they had before we got in and did a diagnosis and took some action. As you can see, the bank accounts continually in the red, and that's their monthly sales line. And yeah, the suppliers were pressuring them. They'd used up their overdraft. They knew that some jobs made money, but they knew others lost money, didn't work for them. But the problem they had was they didn't know which was which. Now I sampled some of the jobs, and this was an incredible figure, really. The actual profit result it was a sample, so it wasn't the full thing, but on the sample I took, which was nearly 30 jobs, the actual profit result on any one job could have been up plus or minus 34% of the price quoted. Now, that's a huge variation. So yeah, sometimes you'll be very profitable, other jobs not. And we had to find out why. And initially there were no obvious links. It wasn't a type of job. It wasn't particular clients. It wasn't one he did on site or whether he did on his shop floor. Took a long time to pin it down. But when we did, and this is a graph of what, this took a while for them to get the things going again. This is a graph of the same situation in a couple of years' time. Okay, so here's that bank balance in the red all the time, and here it's in the blue, except for one blip here, and that blip was when they bought a lot of materials for a big job for that sale thing there. But just look at that sales line. The sales line essentially is the same as it was previously. They weren't selling anymore. They were just actually making some money on the job that they had, on the jobs that they had. So the pressure's gone. They've got money in the bank. They can pay creditors, so that's not a problem. They were only taking on jobs that made money, and those jobs were coming in on budget, and they're able to pay everybody in full on time. So plugging in the profit leak meant literally tens of thousands of dollars cash surplus in their bank account each month, and it just transformed their business and transformed their lives. Totally different situation. And in fact, as a quick side note, this is where somebody gave me the term. I put this up on a board with having to illustrate in a workshop what I did, and that's where somebody popped up and said, "Oh, you're a profit leak detective, are you?" And so I said, "Thank you, I'll borrow that." Swipe and deploy, as they say. So the number one reason, I repeat, the number one reason that businesses are probably suffering from profit leaks, they don't know what to look for, where to look, or perhaps even when to look. And Andrew was certainly in that situation. And it's the same with so many businesses I've worked with over the years. In fact, I had a new client sent me an email only last week to say, I didn't realize what I didn't know about my business. So not knowing is a real problem. In essence, if you like, generating more sales won't help your cash shortage if those sales are leaking profits, which are certainly Andrew's problem. Do we have any questions at this stage before I move on to the next topic? Phil loves fishing with the family. There's a few yeses there. Any questions? Nope. Well, I'll come back and have a look, but yes, we'll keep moving then. Okay. Let's move on to 3 keys to boosting the cash in your bank account without having to work harder or longer. Now, in summary, those 3 keys are, firstly, understanding where your sales come from and your profits, increasing margins through better pricing strategies, and improving margins through more accurate cost of sales. Let's start with the first of those, sales. Now, what do you sell and to whom? It might seem counterintuitive to think that sales cause profit leaks, but in my experience, that's where the most frequent and largest profit leaks occur, as it was with Andrew. But there are 2 kinds. There's, like Andrew was experiencing, actual cash losses, and then there's money left on the table. And we'll explore both these issues. I would think most of you have heard of the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, that the majority of your sales will come from a minority of your products and services, and you probably know which ones they are. But the question is, are those products or services profitable or as profitable as they could be? As I say, most small business owners are likely to know their sales by product groups, but they're less likely to know whether those product groups are profitable. Their accounts will tell them how much they sell of a particular product, but it won't tell them necessarily the profitability of each group. That takes some digging, usually I found in the accounts. Digging takes time and effort, and that means it's rarely done. And then the same issue applies with customers. Small business owners are even less likely to know sales by their customer groups. Yes, they'll know them by individual customers, but not by customer groups or market segments. And even more so, their accounts will tell them how much they sell to a particular customer, Bill Blogg Proprietary Limited or whoever it might be, but rarely will it tell them the gross profitability of each customer, or importantly, the gross profitability of those customer groups or market segments. Again, that information is usually obtainable, but it takes some digging. One of the most useful tools I use is what I call a product customer matrix, where you list down the left-hand side of a table all your products and services, and across the top you list your major customer groups or market segments, and you fill the boxes in the middle. How much of product A do you sell to customer group Y? And that'll give you a good picture of the 80-20 of both products and customer groups. But I actually use two of these product customer matrices. The first, as I say, is of sales. The second one is usually much harder to get, but I like to work with clients to get it, and that is a gross profitability matrix, because that's where the real information is. What we're trying to do is find the useful few of your products and customers that put cash in your bank account. So, question. And again, you might like to put some answers, quick yeses and nos in the chat box. Do you know which of your products and services produce most of your sales? And can you say the same about which products or services produce the most profits? And what about your customers? Do you know the useful few? And let's see whether people have got some idea. Let's got a. I will have a replay, Lynette, after we finish, so you'll be able to download that, and it will also be up on YouTube, and we'll send the links on that. But you will get an automatic link to the replay. Anybody else got some any comments on whether they know their useful few in terms of products or customer groups? Okay. Right. Let's move to another example that really illustrates this point. Now, this example is a hypothetical, but I found real life situations that reflect it time and time again, and I will have another example later on that broadly shows the same thing. So this is called the car parts business, right? It sells engine parts, oil filters, accessories, and audio equipment for cars. So let's have a look at where its sales are. Remembering this is a hypothetical, but it's very, very real. So 70% of its sales come from two product lines, engine parts and accessories. That's pretty useful stuff to know. But what about profitability? Now, what we see here is that 80% of the profits come from accessories and audio, while engine parts only contribute 12% of gross profits. Now, so this is even more useful than just knowing the sales. But what I've found over the years is that where businesses I've helped improve their profitability, they don't have this basic information. What about, well, yeah, I guess the point here is that looking at the 80-20 rule for products and services, for profitability of products and services, gives a different picture. Two product groups dominate gross profits with 80% of GP, but only one of those is the same group as in sales. So the 80-20 rule applied to gross profits helps us make useful decisions, helps us make better decisions because it gives us more accurate information about what is happening in our marketplace and our business. But we also need to look about customers. You know, I talk about a product customer matrix. So our little business is selling to mechanics, individuals, and not-for-profit organisations, and of course the usual collective other. What can that tell us when we look at the figures here? So we're selling the same amount to mechanics as we are to individuals. And where will you get this information? You'll get it in your accounts. You'll have to do some work, but you can get it. So 64% of sales come from those two customer groups. It's the 80-20 situation again. But the interesting thing when you look at this is that they are in fact two very different markets reached by different media. The media you use to get to mechanics is rather different than the individuals. Mechanics are a business. Individuals are Joe Public. So what should they be concentrating on, given that we're looking at increasing cash and profitability? Strategically, you might have other things, but if we're looking to improve the situation in the short term, where should they work? Let's go back to the profitability table. And we find that most of the profits come from selling accessories and audio to individuals. Individuals are the people who buy these things, and that's where most of the money is made. Concentrating on trying to improve the position by concentrating on sales to mechanics would be a profit leak, and it'd be made worse by the fact that the marketing messages would be untargeted. They need to be targeted to improve things. Now, in terms of decision making, as a small business owner, what should he do? And these figures are rounded. He's getting average monthly sales of $41,700 with an average monthly GP of $13,750. What if he did ditch those things that are less profitable, the engine parts and the oil filters, and concentrated and built his business around accessories and audio? Now, assuming he could achieve the same total sales, he'd lose the GP from the engine parts, etc., 2,700. He'd gain 11,000 from He's accessories and audio. He's much tighter niche. Plugging the profit leak would, in this hypothetical, gain him an extra $8,350 a month. Becoming a niche operator, becoming a specialist rather than a generalist. Okay, let's move along then. Let's look at the second key, increasing margins. Now, remember, as a small business owner, you don't have the opportunity to increase profits and cash by significantly increasing sales through low margins. That's what the big boys do. That's what the Woolies and Coles do, right? Or the discount chains. We don't have the opportunity to get significantly increased volumes by playing with low margins. We've got to make our profit from our sales, not just increase low value sales. So can you increase your margin? Well, the first thing is, unless you are in a commodity market, and in a commodity market, the only thing that you can use to differentiate your product is price. Unless you're in a commodity market, there will be opportunities to add value. And if you can add value, you can increase prices. When I was in the farm machinery industry, my old boss, crusty old character, used to growl, they could always stand a price rise. And he was dead right. They always did. They complained, but they always paid. We had good gear, good equipment we manufactured. So if you don't differentiate, you'll die, right? So if you're going to rely on price alone, the only way is down. Think of that Coles red thumb that's going down, down, down. You get into the game of competing on price, it's just a continual stream looking for lower and lower prices, lower and lower margins. You've got to remember that price is a positioner. Undercharging doesn't just squeeze your margins, it also screams cheap. And by and large, people don't like to buy cheap because cheap usually has a connotation of poor quality, and people don't like poor quality. One way out of it is to incrementally increase prices, small regular price increases. And what we find is that increasing pricing incrementally will increase the value of your sales without really losing volume. The alternative is to take a big increase, right? And I've seen people do this. Increasing prices significantly will actually reposition you in the marketplace. You might lose some volume of sales, but you'll pick up considerably in the volume of gross profits. And in the end, it's the volume of gross profits that are the key to your profitability. I'll just give you an example of a significant repositioning. When I first started consulting, and I did a few courses on what was required, there was another consultant from Melbourne. He had a young family. He was doing quite well. He had a young family. He wanted to spend more time with family. So good economic equation. He thought, I'll increase my prices. I'll get less work. I'll have more time with the family, but I'll make up for those lost sales by the improved margin. So he actually doubled his charge out rate. That's a significant repositioner. And what he did was actually get even more work because he repositioned himself in the marketplace. And he was now perceived in a different way. He was perceived as a much more expert because of the price he charged. So we need to look about strategies for increasing prices. How can we do it? The bottom line is, do you want to increase the volume of sales or the value of sales? That's why we need to look at how we can improve our prices. One of the biggest fallacies I've found in business is that a product's price should be based on its costs. And that assumes for some reason that customers base their willingness to pay on how much it costs you to produce or buy. And you do that has an impact on your margins, obviously. But the reaction of most people in business is that if we increase our prices, we're going to lose sales. The key question is whether those lost sales the gross profits those lost sales would have realised are greater or less than the additional gross profit they gained from the higher prices. As I say, unless you're in a commodity situation, You should be able to differentiate, and the equation should be in your favour. If you hold back from setting and achieving the prices you should, that's when you leave money on the table, right? If we could have sold for more and we don't, we are leaving money on the table. As I've said before, the key to profitability is the volume of gross profit you achieve, not the volume of sales. And in small business, that's what we've got to aim for. So I'm suggesting avoid simplistic pricing processes. As I say, too many small businesses base their prices on their costs and not on their customers' perceptions of value. Underpricing is a surprisingly common source of profit leaks, right? New businesses I've found simply don't charge enough because they're scared to. They want to get going. They want to increase their customer base, and they're scared to put up a higher price. But many existing businesses do the same thing. This fear. I wrote a blog some time ago, or an article that pricing or price increases with the equivalent of a obscene four-letter word in the business thing. It's something that should never be uttered. But if we don't increase our prices, if we underprice all the time, we're just not going to get the margins we deserve, or even the sales we deserve. It's too cheap. You can't be any good. Many a time in workshops, and you might just test this yourself, but many a time in workshops I've asked people when they've lost a sale, why they lost it. And almost always they will tell me the competition was cheaper. They discounted. We couldn't match their price. But if they win a sale, particularly an important one, do you think that they say they won it by having the cheapest price? They always tell me that the superior quality of their product, or their service, the relationship they've developed with the customer, the sheer value of their offering. If they lose, it's because of the competition. If they win, it's because of them. Yeah, it's a bit of a dichotomy, really, isn't it? Underpricing does position you as a commodity. It says, well, there's no real difference between what I'm offering and our competitors are offering, so the only way that customers can make a judgment is on price. Simply charging a little less than your competitors, as so many people do, is not actually a strategy, and it can lead to disaster. I'm suggesting find a way of differentiating, sell on quality, sell on service, sell on your knowledge and your expertise, and that's what determines real value. In the end, value is benefits minus price. So that's the equation that customers mentally make one way or the other. They do that in their mind all the time. Benefits minus price. Value exists in the mind of the customer. We don't determine it. It's how they perceive what you're offering. You need to understand the specific needs of your customer, obviously, and you need to understand what your product or what your service will do for them, the problem it will solve for them, and why it's different. You need to be able to translate, if you like, your features, the facts about your product, into the benefits that it provides those customers, so that they can then make their value equation, their perception of value. And you can further increase your price if you can increase the benefits that arise from your product or service, or the value it provides. I hope that makes sense, and it's worth thinking about. If you can see it from their perspective and understand what a difference your offering will make to them if it really solves their problem. Now, not everybody can stand a price rise, and you'll need to understand your different market segments and how they'll perceive it. Some just can't do it. It'll be too tight. But pricing is not a blanket thing that applies across all your products and services, price changes, price increases, or all your market segments. They need to be broken down and looked at individually. As I've got here, price is only an issue when value remains a mystery. You need to unlock the value in the customer's perceptions. Let's look at the third key, more accurate cost of sales. Now, this one's a bit harder to work our way around, but let's try and do it, eh? We're talking about a more accurate cost of sales and improving the margin through improving your cost of sales. Now, that sounds a bit funny, isn't it? Improving your cost of sales means that you really, well, I guess take a step back. There are other ways of improving your margin other than just increasing pricing. And one of those ways is to recovering properly all your variable costs, that's direct costs that are incurred against a sale. And then we need to look at reduce them, but we'll come to that second bit in a moment. My starting point on pricing is always costs. I'm saying you can't have a strategy of looking at cost as a basis, but you do need to know your costs, because if you don't know your cost, you can't really determine your gross profit margin. It doesn't mean basing your price on those costs, but not knowing your costs means you've got no control over your profits. It's a little bit like that childhood game of pin the tail on the donkey. First you have to know where the ass's arse is, if I may put it that way. Your costs have got two elements, right? When you're selling something, there's two elements. There are the variable costs associated with what you sell. That's the direct costs that are associated with each sale, and the fixed cost of your overheads. You need to try and recover all your variable costs associated with each sale, as well as try and reduce them. Now, I know that sounds a bit contradictory, but let's work our way through it. Covering the real cost of sales will improve margins. Again, that's part of the contradictory bit. The point I want to make is that if the customer who incurs the cost, the direct cost, doesn't pay all the costs they incurred, then either all the customers must pay those costs or you take them out of your profits. And these direct costs I talk about are costs that you wouldn't incur if you didn't make the sale. In other words, if you are retailing something, if you weren't selling a line, you weren't going to keep buying it in. If somebody doesn't do some work on something, after a while you won't employ them if there's no work for them. You won't use certain parts in a repair or a service or whatever. They're the direct costs. You need to understand that role and how it happens. There's some problems if we don't recover those actual costs, like the labour costs. And if you, for those of you charge at labour, be it for repair or manufacturing or professional services, you need to ensure, for instance, that accurate times are recorded against the job, whether it's on a job car on a shop floor or a bookkeeper's time or whatever. You need to ensure that they're accurately recorded. Why? Well, there are three problems. If you don't record it accurately, you won't be charging that customer the full cost that they've actually incurred. Too few hours, those hours are not recovered. They've got to be recovered elsewhere because you're still paying that person doing the job and they've got their own costs. If they're inaccurately recorded, there'll be some jobs that have too many hours, too many costs written on them, and your customer will say, I'm not paying that, and you'll have to do a write-down. You can't recover write-downs. And finally, it's not just the individual jobs. Poor information leads to poor decision-making. Go back to my friend Andrew, the Boilermaker. He had poor information. And because of that poor information, he was making poor decisions, and that was costing him. unless you've got good, accurate information about where you're incurring your costs and what they really are, then you won't really know which areas of the business performs the best or have the most opportunities for improvement. And there's some other things I commonly find, and I'll just briefly touch on them, where costs are not accurately recorded. Take handling. I had a client who repaired small motors, ride-on mowers and things like that. Now, people would bring, often his truck would go and pick them up, or a truck would bring the piece of equipment into his shop. Someone would go out and unload the engine or the bit of equipment. It'd be taken to the workshop, it'd be serviced or repaired, and it would go out and be reloaded on the truck and sent back to the client, to the customer. I asked the owner how much time's involved, and he said, unloading and loading, only about 15 minutes. I said, how do you recover the cost? I said, oh, we don't charge the customer that. Now just think about that. Even if they did 15 minutes, if they did just 4 jobs a day, that's an hour. And if he was like Eddie was, he'd charge about $100 an hour for the service work. Over a week, that's $500 not recovered from the client, the customer who is incurring the cost, which means that he's still got to pay the wages and the on cost, which means that it's coming out of the overheads or out of his profits. In other areas, there's a thing called shop floor consumables, cleaning rags, bolts, nuts, and things like that. Or I've got a client who's a vet. There are gloves and sterilizing items and all that sort of thing. If the customer who incurs that cost of those consumables doesn't pay for them, then again, they're going to come out of the overheads or they're going to come out of your profit line. People will pay them, and it's very hard to do an accurate cost, but what I find most frequently, and it works, people pay it, is a small percentage on the invoice, say between 1% and 3% for consumables. You might have to detail a bit more, but it is recoverable. And when the client pays it, it means you're making a profit, a proper margin on that job. The other one I have some problems with the terms is freight. Now, obviously, if you do something, and I just had a delivery a minute ago, there's some freight costs with it. I've paid those freight costs. But what about incoming materials, right? Incoming deliveries. Do you lose them in overheads? Most accounts I see lose them in overheads. But if they are for a specific job, should not that freight be incurred and costed against that job? Otherwise, it's just costing you profits. So I've talked about, if you like, increasing the cost of sales by properly recovering the variable cost. But what about reducing the cost of sales? Well, there's 3 things we can do. One is better purchasing. One of the things I typically find is that people don't, once they've got a good established supplier, they don't regularly check whether you're getting the best prices. They don't test the market at times by getting quotations from a range of sources. They don't, if they've been doing things for a while, they don't always look to see whether there are now alternative materials or alternative supplies that could do a better job or available at a better price. Better purchasing can help reduce our cost of sales. And then there's better processes. Reducing the time it takes to do a job by simplifying the process or reducing the number of steps. The longer you've been doing the job the same way, the more likely there are to be opportunities for improvement, and you might want to share those gains with your customers. I'll give you a specific example. I did some work for an electricity authority some years ago, and one of the processes, if you like, was connecting a new house to the power supply. It was taking 15 steps. We mapped out the process, 15 steps, and those steps were taking 30 days. we did some work with the teams who were involved in that. We got it down to 8 steps and 1 day. You can imagine somebody wanting to move into a new house and waiting for the electricity to go on might be pleased with the improvement. And the actual cost of the supplier, 15 steps to 8 steps, big improvement, much reduced cost. And the final one is making fewer mistakes. What happens when you make a mistake? You usually have to fix it. Fixing takes time and money. So there's a cost to it, and that cost is coming out of the same price you're going to get anyway. So that's reduced your margin. But there's what we call an opportunity cost as well. And that opportunity cost is the sale you could have been making while you're fixing that previous mistake. So finding ways to reduce the mistakes that might be happening in your business is a great way of actually reducing your cost of sales. So, in summary, working on your gross profit margin may offer greater returns for less effort than chasing increased sales. Increasing sales is always hard work, and it will almost always deliver more cash through better margins. So just to summarize those 3 keys: understanding where your sales come from and where your profits come from, increasing your margins through better pricing strategies, and improving your margins through more accurate and reduced cost of sales. Okay. We all okay so far? I'll just check. John's asking whether this is a function. That's John's asking whether it says the writing on the slides is fuzzy. Is that a function of Webinar Jam? John, it could be. I've heard that, but it all looks clear, very sharp on mine. I'll test that back. And another John has said it's reverted back to the start. Not on my screen. John, I'll just have to keep going, I'm afraid. Sharper now. Thanks, John. Okay, 3 common but cash leaking mistakes to avoid. And I'll just quickly run through them before talking in a little bit more detail. The first one is ignoring the problem and hoping it will solve itself, taking action but trying to do it yourself, and taking action but the wrong action. Let's look at that. Hear no evil, see no evil, isn't it? Ignore the problem and hope it'll solve itself. Don't worry, be happy. But what's the cost of doing nothing? If you don't do anything, the chances are, if there's a real problem there, it's not going to go away. So those profit leaks will continue. If there's no change, there's no gain, and there's more pain. We've all been to, and the second one is taking action yourself. I can do this, and we've been to a workshop or seminar. We've seen some great ideas, and you thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply that, and then life gets in the road. There's a meeting, there's a problem, some staff didn't turn up. You just get busy, and somehow or other you just haven't quite got round to going back to fixing that problem or improving whatever you're going to improve, and so the leaks continue, as does the pain. And the third one is when we try and do it ourselves and it's not in our kit bag of expertise. As I say there, it's kind of like the person who's not a lawyer trying to represent himself in court. He's got a fool for a client. Taking action but the wrong action can also be a mistake. Just look at a real life situation where this did happen, and to show you the impact. So we'll call this company Tip Top Products, not its real name, but it's a real company, and the figures are real too, actually. So Tip Top Products is turning over just under $2.5 million, cost of sales 2.173, making a GP of just over $250,000, got a gross profit margin of 10.5%, and a net profit margin of 4.7%. Basically a pretty ordinary performance, and they've been trying to improve themselves, and what they've been trying to do is increase sales, right? That's been the push. We've got to increase sales, and which is usually a pretty typical answer that people do to try and change the situation. They had two divisions. Let's just call them Division 1 and Division 2. Division 1 was performing quite well, right? It's turning over just under 1.3. It's got a gross profit margin of 21%, so it's looking pretty good. And the strategy, but their sales were declining as a proportion of total sales. So if you like, what Tip Top had been trying to do was to increase sales of Division 2. But Division 2 is actually got a negative gross profit margin. The more they sold, the more they lost. Why didn't they do anything about it? Well, it's like going back to Andrew. They didn't know. What they did in their accounts, they could tell me how much they sold in Division 1 and 2 and the individual products and services within those divisions, but the cost of sales was just in one column. They didn't separate out the cost of sales between the two divisions. So, if you like, they had these individual sales, then they just had the one cost of sales to get the gross profit, etc., etc. So we sat down with them and worked our way through, and this is what we found, that Division 2's costs were higher than its sales. So what they were doing and working so hard to increase the sales in Division 2 was actually costing them money. And just as an interesting question, a little question for you, why don't you quickly put in the chat box what you think they should have done? It's still a bit of work in progress. What do you think they should have done? I know what I would have done, but they didn't do what we suggested. Any thoughts? John's just commenting on the sharpness of the slides again. I'm wondering if that's something to do with bandwidth. And I don't know from my end. I'm on ADSL2. We haven't got NBN yet. I'm on ADSL2, but that's not bad. Okay, and on the other question, John, is depending on whether you're on wireless or cable, might also have an impact. So, would I fix my plumbing problems myself? I'd no sooner try and fix my plumbing problems than represent myself in court. The results may be expensive. As I say, Tip Top, we're trying one thing, and I would have recommended another. Okay, trying to. Peter decided they needed Division 2. If they did look at cost of sales and then either increase prices or increase turnover. What they're working on is actually trying to reduce the cost of sales in Division 2 and improve their operating efficiency to improve their margin. They're in a reasonably competitive area, so they don't feel they can increase the price too much, so they're looking at reducing the cost of sales to improve the margin that way. Okay, in summary, 3 common but costly mistakes. Ignore the problem and hope it will solve itself. Take action and trying to do it yourself. Taking action, but the wrong action. What have we covered? What's a profit leak? The number one problem that prevents you generating the cash you deserve. Not knowing what to look for, when to look, or where to look. 3 keys to boosting the cash in your bank account without having to work harder or longer. And 3 common but cash leaking mistakes to avoid. Now, I'll have a Q&A section in a moment that we can toss questions at me. We'll stay online for a while for that. But in saying thank you, I'd suggest don't let Profit Leaks run away with your cash like a thief in the night. Before I get to the Q&A, I do have not an offer because it's not a sales thing, but I did want to offer you something to implement the issues I've been discussing here. I call it a stepping stone to a better future. It's a no-cost 45-minute consult, just you and I one-on-one. I don't have any expectation for you to be buying anything, or no expectations you'll go into a program or anything like that. It's just figuring out, can I see something in that 45 minutes, looking strategically about how you know what's happening in your business and what could be causing profit leaks for you. Now, normally that's not free, but I charge $500 an hour for my consulting time. But because Kerry invited me to present to you, and I want to thank her for that, you get the benefit of that. I've got 5 spots left next week. That's the URL to get to that. Yeah, I'll leave that with you and go to Q&A. Need more information? Kerry, it sounds like you're back online.
Yes, I just unmuted myself, and thanks very much for that, Adam. Very pertinent, very interesting, and just exactly as you've explained. I've seen it many times myself with most businesses, particularly small businesses. The ability to actually track all their costs and understand where the margins are, and where, particularly by service or by product, is something that's absolutely crucial. And 9 times out of 10, everyone's doing their absolute darndest and they've got their heart and soul in the business, but they just don't understand the nitty-gritty part of these sorts of details. So thank you again. It's been really, really interesting, and I'd certainly urge anyone. Adam, do you want to go back one slide? So we've still got that URL up. Yeah. So if anyone would like to book a consultation with you, then that's just take a note of that and pop it in your browser, and you'll find that you can have you can work out a time to chat with Adam, and I'd highly recommend that. So I don't know, I can't see whether there's any questions coming through at all, Adam. Can you see from your end?
I can, and I don't have any questions yet. If anybody'd like to ask any questions, I'll just give you a couple of minutes more, but feel free. And if not, I guess we'll wrap up.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks again, Adam. It's certainly an area that small business really needs to focus on, and it's free money in many ways. Just being able to plug some of those profit leaks, that's just money straight into your bank account.
Exactly.
$1 saved in cost, it's $1 straight to your bottom line. So that area in particular is crucial.
Indeed, yeah. Look, it is, and it makes so much difference. And as I say, working on increasing sales, we've all had to do that too, can be very hard work. So I guess I'm suggesting, if cash and profitability is the problem, there are other ways of going about it rather than busting your gut and doing the 7-day-a-week bit. So yeah, see if you can find another way of doing it. And these are some of the thoughts, some of the things that I've found over the years that do make a difference. With that, Kerry, and thank you very much for the opportunity. With that, if I've got no questions, John, the URL, I think, if I've done this correctly, yes, you can. Let me put that in the chat box.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you can just copy and paste that into the chat box, then people can do likewise. Copy and paste into the browser.
Yeah. Let me just see whether there it is. Can't read URL.
I don't know what would be causing that. I'm certainly seeing it quite clearly at my end, and I'm only on ADSL, so that's a weird thing.
I'm just looking to see. I just put it in the chat box, and why it's not going. Did that go up? There it is. There's the URL in the at the top of the chat box. Can you see that, people? Can you see that at all, Gary?
I can't see it, no. But I think that's just the view that I'm on.
Yeah, as a co-presenter, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Phil, pleasure. Yeah.
I was going to say, Adam, when the replay goes out, you could include the URL in that as well, just as part of the email, can you? Or
yes, I can do that. I can include that there, and in the replay, yeah, they'll be able to see it, and hopefully there will be a link when people finish.
Okay.
Okay. Well, look, everybody, thank you very much for attending. I hope you've got some benefit out of that. Feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions. Kerry, thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure, Adam, and thank you very much for bringing such fantastic information to us today.
Righto, thanks. Righto.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Cheers now. Bye, everybody.